Welcome to our episode 2 of Dracula. This is where we talk about the movies we like. We hope you liked the first episode. I posted on our Facebook page about getting some back information and maybe, some of your opinions, and I got very little. I think Brendan Williams said something about living eternally. That was about it. Do we get anything else? Anybody see anything else?
About 3 people said it's because they suck.
Yeah.
Upcoming guest Glenn Cochran of Happy Movie Monday said it's the best love story of all time.
That's true.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't agree with that. Probably not either, but...
Well, name a better one.
Summer School.
Did you ever see that? I was trying to think of a really bad one.
Mark Harmon and his dog. It's a touching moment.
Did you ever see Ghost Dad?
Out of all the people you could bring up.
Leonard Part 6 has an emotional part to it.
Oy vey.
Leonard Part 6.
I never could watch that movie because I can't find the first 5.
Did you ever see Mother Jugs and Speed?
Yes.
Yeah, that's another good movie.
Because I wanted to be an American citizen, and if you haven't seen that film, you're not allowed to be an American citizen.
Should we bring up Meteor Man while we're at it?
In all fairness, Meteor Man is not a great film, but it gave us a little bit of superheroes in a time when we didn't have any
I agree.
In the films.
And I got to see Cypress Hill. I got to see Cypress Hill act on screen.
It still kind of sucks, doesn't it?
I mean, it's supposed to be a family film, so they can't have him do stuff, and he's afraid of heights. I kind of appreciate they made a superhero who has a factual fear that he's afraid of heights.
Right.
I think that's an interesting thing. It's not much in that film, but it's cool.
And welcome to our episode about Dracula.
Yeah, where we talk about Robert Townsend for an hour and a half.
Robert Townsend, I would watch him.
Let's talk about the best parts of Hollywood Shuffle. Was that his first movie? Is it Hollywood Shuffle? Is that right? That sounds right.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, it's Robert Townsend. Anyway, so, gentlemen, what are some of your favorite Dracula films?
Well, I didn't just do films.
What are some of your favorite Draculas?
So, well, I'll just go first. So, I will be the first. I told Joe prior to this, just like when I mentioned in the first episode, I really have a hard time with Dracula just because he doesn't appeal to me. Nor does most vampire movies. Even the movie I liked as a kid, The Lost Boys. I know it's not Dracula, it's vampires, but even that doesn't hold up for me to this day. I don't think
The Lost Boys is a very good movie. It's got some cool visuals in it.
It's got some cool visuals, but yeah, it's not a good movie.
It did lead to one of the best Simpson Halloween lines ever. If you tell me you're a vampire at the movies, you get a free small soda. I don't know why. I love that line every time it's in that episode.
But there is one movie from my childhood that featured Dracula that, in my mind, still holds up. And it was my introduction into Dracula. So he has a very close place in my heart, and that's Duncan Rieger, who played Dracula in The Monster Squad. Okay. I liked his portrayal as Dracula. He did a really good evil turn. I'll be, you can watch it and you can freely admit that he is going full on camp in some of those scenes, but his version of Dracula, his anger, his desire to kill, that's what appealed to me as a kid. And honestly, it's what made me like Universal Monsters was the Monster Squad. It was my introduction. So his interpretation of Dracula is actually more important to me than Bela Lugosi or, the countless others who have played him. So, Duncan Rieger, I'm sorry, it's Rieger. I had to listen to a French Canadian interview to get that pronunciation correctly because he is from Montreal. But it's Frank Decker. Right?
Fred Decker.
Sorry. Fred Decker's Monster Squad. Dracula in that is pure joy for me. And I actually still enjoy it to this day.
I can't. I mean, I have a fondness for it in my heart, but I watched it a few years ago, and it is nonsensical as hell.
No,
doesn't
it's
even-
camp.
No, I mean it plot and just people, just Dracula just shows up. I mean it just. I want to interview Fred Decker and ask him where's 20 minutes of that movie at where they explain certain things, but it may never have been shot. I don't know. And then I went and I watched Night of the Creeps. Is always my favorite Fred Decker film, and I rewatched that 2 weeks ago.
You know you're lying. We've had to listen to you talk about RoboCop 3 over and over and over again.
Night of the Creeps.
I prefer his work on. I prefer his work on Enterprise.
Rewatching Night of the Creeps. There's a bunch of plot holes in that one too that just jump nonsensically, but it may just be Fred Decker.
So there is
but the Dracula in that is not bad. I give you that, but it's the second best monster performance. The guy that plays the werewolf in that is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
What's his name? It doesn't matter. He's a great character actor.
I'm blanking. Yeah. I'll look at it in a second. But I will say this.
He plays a vampire in Fright Night Part 2. And he plays the genius living in the basement of Real Genius, which I watched 3 weeks ago, which actually I still thought was pretty funny. Well, kind of funny.
So according to Fred Decker, which kills me as I said the name wrong and it's right here in front of me. The first draft of the screenplay was so huge that the opening of the film featured Van Helsing accompanied by Zeppelins and hundreds of men on horseback storming Dracula's castle.
Yeah.
Well, now I want to see that.
And who was the other writer?
Shane Black.
Shane Black. Because they were college friends.
Yeah. So that's just, if I didn't have the Monster Squad as a kid, I would not have had The Mummy, Frankenstein, the creature from the Black Lagoon, who's referred to as the Gill Man, in that movie. So that's why. Oh crap! I'm just forgot his name.
I think the Monster Squad
Duncan Rieger
is one of those movies that could be remade.
Oh, by far.
There's movies that I think you should leave them alone, or what's the point? But Monster Squad is one of those that's an idea that could be. I don't know. I need to. It's only about 120 minutes long. It's short.
It's very short. Which at the time when I saw it as an adult, I'm like, it is that short. It's an hour and 19 minutes.
Yeah, it is short, and it has a lengthy prologue, and it's still short.
John Grease is the one who played the Wolfman.
Yeah,
you would also know him from
Napoleon
Dynamite.
Mm-hmm. He's uncle. All right, James, you're up next.
I'm gonna bring one up that I think a lot of people have actually said is better than the Bela Lugosi one. That's been starting to be debated as better than Bela Lugosi.
Was it shot at night while the Bela Lugosi one was being shot?
I am talking about the vampire Dracula as played by, you're right, Carlos Valerius.
Yeah.
And a little bit about that. I learned some more about how that was shot. I don't know. You may know this, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason a lot of people hail it as being better than the English American version of Dracula is because, as Joe alluded to, it was shot at night. We used to not dub films. We would just film 2 of them. And so they were making the Spanish Dracula for the Spanish market the exact same time they were making the American one in 1931. And it was actually thought to be lost up until the 1970s. I didn't know that. I thought they always.
I didn't know about the lost part, but I knew the rest of it.
It was actually rediscovered in the late 70s and restored, and it's now 2015. It was put in the Library of Congress as an important film. But the reason a lot of people say it's better than the American version, and even there's those that debate that Carlos Valerius is actually better than Bela Lugosi, which is challenging for most people.
I'll talk to you about it when you're done. Yeah.
But the reason that a lot of people think it's better is it's longer. And if you watch, there is, speaking of things feeling like they're left out or there's some scenes that are shot, they would watch the dailies from the English version to see what they did, and then they improved on it. So they use different angles, they use different atmosphere, they do a lot of different quote-unquote special effect work at the time that works better in the Spanish version. And if you have the Ultimate Collection, the Monster Collection, the class,
I have it over here.
It is featured, and it's so. If you have that, or if you're interested in this isn't some obscure thing, you can buy this on DVD. It usually comes with the American version.
Yep.
But a lot of people have recognized it as actually being superior to the Bela Lugosi. Now, the actor was told to watch what Bela Lugosi did, and I believe the quote was, "Do it like that, but better." So there is some. I mean, so in some ways, Carlos Valerius, as some people say that he actually does Dracula better, he's still doing it based on what he saw Bela Lugosi do in the dailies. But it has been considered really significant, and if you do watch it, there are some cooler shots in it than in the actual Bela
It's a
Lugosi.
better directed. Now, Todd Browning's masterpiece isn't Dracula; it's Freaks. Todd Browning's
agreed.
from Louisville, Kentucky. Just throwing that out there. He directed Dracula, but Todd Browning's Dracula is not as well directed, and I apologize for not knowing the Spanish version, the Mexican director that actually made it.
He wasn't Spanish.
He wasn't?
George Melford.
I did not know that.
George Melford directed. He was actually born in New York.
Mm-hmm.
He's son of German immigrants. And so he actually got started directing romantic comedy or romantic films, things like that, To Have and to Hold, The Sheik. All of that would have been in the 19-teens and 1920s. He stayed with the same company, and then Universal Pictures basically hired him to start directing their talkies in 1929. And that's when they asked him if he would do some Spanish language films, and he agreed to do 4 of them, one of which was
Dracula.
Yeah. So, yeah, he...
it's fascinating. I didn't know
that man has 231 film credits to his title.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Which back then, they were doing 4 movies at a time. So
yeah, I didn't know he directed. I didn't know who directed. I couldn't remember. But I will tell you that a lot of filmmakers, and I can't remember, I think Joe Dante, and the reason I know a lot of this is because I learned from other documentaries that people talk about. Filmmakers will say the movie is better made, but the thing that it's lacking is Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. Again,
at the end of the day, you remember Bela Lugosi if you watch both of those versions.
And you can't cut Bela Lugosi out because, as I said, Valerius was told, watch what he does, then do it better.
Better, right. That's interesting.
But yeah, so if you've never seen the Spanish version of Dracula, I do recommend it. As Joe said,
it is better shot. It's a prettier movie. It's more elegant. I completely agree.
Filmed on the same sets, filmed the exact same time. At night,
yep.
It may have worked to its advantage.
I'm having a hard time picking.
Does anybody think that the guy who played Dracula looks a lot like Christopher Lee?
I'd have to look it up.
He has a different look. You're right. Real quick, Joe, before you go to yours, he does have a different look than Bela Lugosi. Like, it's not like they went, oh, find us a Spanish Bela Lugosi. You're right. Actually, I looked at him earlier, and I was like, he could play Dracula, but I don't think he matches Lugosi. You're right. He's closer to a...
He's more close. He looks a lot like Christopher Lee.
No, I don't. I'll have to
look. Dead air.
I'm sorry. I thought one of you was about to say something. All right. So, speaking of Christopher Lee, that reminds me, I'm having... he looks like he's on a comedy variety hour.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like Christopher Lee. He looks like a combination of Don...
Actually, he looks like
Don Adams and Sid Caesar.
Nick Cage.
Okay. First off, that is not the pictures I was looking at.
No.
You're right. He looks like Don Adams.
Don Adams and Sid Caesar had a bastard child.
He missed it by that much.
Right? And he's got the Sid Caesar kind of pointed features with the Don Adams face. And now they just...
Here's him doing more of it. This is him doing more of the Lugosi type look.
That, somebody farted.
Yep.
Hey, that worked for Supernatural for over 15 seasons now.
Oh, Jared Paddleduck, you fart-smelling actor. All right, if you don't know what that is, find me at a con when they start to happen again.
See the shot I'm looking at looks like Christopher Lee's talking to old John Turturro, and to the right's the guy from Magnum P.I.
Which one?
Magnum P.I. or Higgins?
No, not Magnum.
That's the only two.
Higgins.
So,
Higgins?
Moving right along, I'm having a hard time picking my 2 favorites because I don't know that I ever watch either one of them for, oh my God, this is one of my favorite movies, because I'm with Chad. None of these Dracula films are one of my favorite movies, and that, by the way, includes Dracula. I appreciate all of them. I've enjoyed watching a lot of them. I don't know that I ever go, oh my God, we got to watch this every Halloween. So, I was introduced to Hammer because my mom is different, and she watched all of them.
And she needed something to beat him with, so she just.
I was getting ready to say. James took my joke.
She grew up in Merritt Island, and across Merritt Island is Cocoa Beach, and Cocoa Village.
Is full of vampires. Thanks, Jeff, for that story.
It's because they came from space. They were space vampires, and they rode back on one of the shuttles. Neil Armstrong was half vampire on his mother's side. Look it up. It's all there.
Colin Wilson told you that. Nobody's going to get that. Anyway.
Nope, but Cocoa Beach, full of vampires. Everybody knows stay away from Cocoa.
So Cocoa had a little movie house, and of course, that was when the time Hammer was killing everybody. And Hammer Films was a British company that made horror films ripping off Universal. But they made their own brand, and they had boobs in them, well, a lot of cleavage and blood, and they were visceral films.
No, yeah. I'm sure there was quite a few idiots who made those movies.
So what were you saying, James?
No, I was going to say they had the two factors that
they had boobs and blood in them, and people loved them.
Actually, usually
flocked to them.
Usually more blood
than boobs. There was a lot of cleavage.
But now, in all fairness, the actresses they did have could vamp it up really well.
They could, and they lucked out because they cast these two cats. One guy was named Peter Cushing, and the other guy was who? That's right, Sid Caesar, Christopher Lee,
Christopher Walken.
Absolutely. So if you don't know who
vampire
or Peter Cushing are, you've never seen a Star Wars. Now, I'm having a hard time because two of my favorites, I want to lump them in together, is the first is Horror of Dracula, which actually, by the way, was called Dracula in every other place. So if you're Googling Horror of Dracula, sometimes it will just come up as Dracula, depending on what country it was released in. Horror of Dracula was Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing played Van Helsing. We have these memories of Christopher Lee playing Dracula, but he never spoke a word in the first Dracula.
Really?
No.
Huh.
Didn't want him to talk. He was more menacing. He hissed, but he didn't talk.
Huh.
Never spoke a word.
Just like my mother.
He hissed at him. He ended up playing Dracula multiple times for Hammer until I think the last one is Dracula AD 1972 or whatever it's called. I think it's the last time he played him. However, that to me is one of my, when I think of Dracula, I probably do think of Bela Lugosi, but I knew somebody was going to either talk about it or we already know what it is. I think Christopher Lee is Dracula. I think of the blood eyes and the blood coming down his face and that famous shot like this. And if you're listening to me, it's E.
Yeah, that cleared it up, Joe. The E face.
Yeah, the E that cleared up everything for our auditory listeners.
That's what I think of when I think of Dracula to me.
Not in Braille.
The issue is that the second favorite, or the one I'll probably talk about, is called Brides of Dracula, which is actually the one I enjoy the most. Problem is, have you all ever seen it? It's referenced in John Carpenter's Vampires. The whole scene where he lights up and he puts the gun and then tries to burn it out, that's all from Peter Cushing and Brides of Dracula. Even Carpenter talks about how he stole half of that from Brides of Dracula. Here's the problem. Christopher Lee's not in it. You know who plays Dracula? Nobody.
Erwin Keys.
No one. This young guy's account who gets the curse and it's kind of blown away because they couldn't get Christopher Lee to play Dracula in that one. Actually, want to know a fun story about why he played Dracula so many times?
No.
When Hammer come to him, well, fuck you, I'm going to tell it anyway. And I edit the show, so for you people listening, I flipped them off.
No, no, Joe. The auditory was enough to know that was a flip off.
Now do it in Braille.
It was if they were smart. So they would tell Christopher, hey, we got this other movie coming. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. It's like, yeah, you will. And then they would go hire a lot of people, and then he would feel bad because if he didn't do it, they wouldn't make the movie, and all these people would be out of work. He said it happened to him 3 times, if not more. So that is.
So is there so when are you going to tell the interesting story?
Later.
Why he's sitting in his own bed going, "Screw James and Chad. This is the best story ever." Ow! I just hit myself in the face with the microphone.
Or did Joe make you do that? Does Joe have mind powers?
If I had mind powers, believe me, this would be going differently.
Yeah, I would hope you would be, doing something different. I don't know. I got nothing.
All right. So, man, I struggled with my second pick. I didn't know if I should go classic or go more modern. So I'm assuming one of you is going to bring up the more classic version. So I will go with Gary Oldman and Bram Stoker's Dracula.
It's not on my list.
I didn't think it would be. I think the classic one will be. So I left it to you all. Gary Oldman's portrayal, specifically the first half, the first quarter of that movie where he's old and, in the castle with Keanu Reeves. I really like that portrayal. It's not the best Dracula movie by far. It has a lot of flaws, in my opinion.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
I watched it about 5 years ago. I sat down and watched it. I'm like, can it be as boring as I thought it was when I was a kid? And it's still boring, but Gary Oldman's really cool in it. And I think in terms of a portrayal of Dracula, he gets that darkness that some people who play Dracula just don't get. The scene where one of the things I found interesting was the scene where he is shaving Keanu Reeves and he takes the blade and licks it drunk off his ass. I just found that interesting. That's probably why that performance is so creepy when he trembles as he licks the razor blade. It was breathtaking. The other thing I didn't know about,
was he because an alcoholic?
He was an alcoholic. Yeah, I think Gary Oldman has a lot of issues in terms of alcoholism. But when I was doing research on Dracula, this has nothing to do with who Gary Oldman's Dracula, but I like to share it. Do you know who was actually originally considered for, or one of the considerations for Van Helsing?
Nope.
Liam Neeson. Not Liam. Yeah, Liam Neeson. And I was just shocked by that. Just him. But of course, then they found out Sir Anthony Hopkins was wanting the role, and they said, "Well, sorry, Liam.
I mean,
your success is about 10 years away."
I mean, I enjoyed it at the time, but Mel Brooks criticized it at the time, saying he didn't understand where Anthony Hopkins got his performance or why he would have played him that way. And now, in retrospect, I agree with him. I mean, it's just completely over the top.
The movie's really
makes
uneven.
Very little no sense.
It's very uneven. I mean, everybody. Yeah,
probably.
Exactly. But no, I just. But Gary Oldman, I don't think Gary Oldman's actually done a bad movie. No, he's made a lot of bad movies. Have you seen the one where he plays a short person? But no, Gary Oldman, but any movie Gary Oldman's in, he enhances the movie. I mean, that's how Gary Oldman is. He's a great actor. And his portrayal of Dracula, I thought, was right up there with some of the best. So that's my opinion. All right, James, what do you got?
Are you going?
James.
Yeah, it's a Castlevania theme.
Oh.
You can't talk about Dracula without mentioning Castlevania. It sounds like just
your cell phone's going off.
No, that's the old 8-bit theme. Now, that has the full, all versions that's been done. But, actually, if you're a Castlevania fan, as bad as 8-bit soundtracks are, they actually managed to put a pretty good, creepy vibe when you get to Dracula's castle. You can't talk about Dracula without bringing up Castlevania if you're doing this from a pop culture viewpoint and not just movies. Because Castlevania now is its own TV series.
It's really good.
It is. It's better than it has any right to be. It's good, but even more so, it's better than it has any right to be because that should be a played out storyline. And I give credit to, I think Grant Morris writes on that. And
yep.
I don't know. It's fun. I never played the video game, so I have no clue.
I never played the video game either, so
I didn't play a lot either because I wasn't, we didn't have a lot of video games.
It didn't have a television.
You ever play that Mario? He jumps on mushrooms. That guy. But
James's version of Super Mario Brothers was his brother hitting him in the head with a pipe.
Castlevania.
Well, they ate mushrooms.
Sounds like he was giving him a mushroom kind of tattoo thing. But keep going, James.
Castlevania has been a video game series forever, going back to the early 1980s. During at least the days of the Nintendo. So
8-bit
I guess
Nintendo, Castlevania, yes, in the late 80s.
But it has been made on the following systems, not just Nintendo: Amiga, Android, Arcade, Commodore 64, DOS, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Microsoft Windows. I don't know what MSX2 is, but they made a game system for that.
So they made it on DOS?
Yeah.
I would just give it the boot.
Oh, I see what you did there. PlayStation 2, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn, Super NES, the PC, the Wii, the Wii U, the Xbox One, the Xbox 360, and the Xbox. The game follows originally Simon Belmont, but eventually expands to be the Belmont clan, and they are historically vampire hunters. And of course, if you're a vampire hunter, who are you going to go after? Sir Rutherford Sir Ruthven from our last episode. But since nobody knows him, you're going to go after Dracula. And so the games were stupidly popular, continued to be. I said I never played them a lot because I didn't have access to them. But they have been
But you're
around.
talking about them today.
Well, because they're important. You can't talk about Dracula in pop culture, and I try to add something beyond movies because you all cover movies. But if we're going to say we're a pop culture podcast, we got to do better. And so I want to bring up video games, and I think that's one of the best video game examples is Castlevania. You can't because again, it's became TV, but even before that, it was in one of Chad's favorite shows, Captain N and the Game Masters. Simon Belmont was one of the characters that helped Captain N. I can't see how you can love cops but can't appreciate Captain N and the Game Masters.
So you do have to give a short nod at least to Graham McTavish for playing Dracula in the Castlevania series because he actually did a pretty good job.
Well, and I think the thing about that series is that Dracula is still somewhat sympathetic, even though he's also terrifying. I mean, he's terrible. He's horrifying, but he still has his reasons for why he is like he is.
Is the second season up? I think I only watched the first
season.
There's
3 seasons, isn't there?
3 seasons.
Three seasons are out.
I think I only watched the first. Is there only like 5 or 6 episodes or what? It's short.
It's relatively short. Yeah, it's not a 60 episode commitment.
No, but I was trying to remember how many it was. I enjoyed it.
It's 10 episodes.
Each season or all together?
But
each season.
The other part about it is that this game was so popular, and again, it's been present in pop culture that it spawned spinoffs that most people don't really remember. They were big in Japan, but less so here, including Kid Dracula. Castlevania was so popular in Japan, they were like, we need a spinoff. What can we do? We don't want to make another Castlevania. We've already got one in development. We can't have 2 coming out at once. So they could develop Kid Dracula, which is literally them parodying themselves.
Real quick, I want to correct myself because Joe was right because he's only watched the first season. The first season was only 4 episodes.
Okay.
Season 2 was 8. Season 3 was 10.
I just thought it was short. I couldn't remember.
Go ahead, James.
And then there was even a multiplayer fighting game, which was called Castlevania Judgment. There's been arcade machines, but also there's been slot machines. You can actually go to Vegas and play Castlevania as a slot. So, a slot, Joe.
I got it. I was actually just sitting here thinking about all the times it was attempted to be made into a movie.
Yeah, and that's anyway. So I wanted to bring it up. If you're
Paul
talking
Thomas
about
Anderson was going to make it, not Paul. It's Paul something W.S. Anderson, not Paul Thomas Anderson. I apologize for you people. Don't get too complicated out there. Paul W.S. Anderson, not the guy that gave you Magnolia. We're talking about the guy that gave you the remake of many things. Oh, what the hell's the name of that?
Underworld.
What?
Underworld?
No, that's Lynn, whatever his name is.
Weissman. Resident Evil.
Yeah, he did Resident Evil 1 and then 4, 5, and 6. But I was actually trying to think of the Corman movie he remade. It just, my mind went blank.
Well, wrapping up Castlevania, as I alluded to earlier, it covers, if you play the entire series, I guess, you're going to run into Simon Belmont, who was the first one. He's also in part 2, which is called, Simon's Quest, which is obviously his quest. He comes back into Castlevania 4. But the other thing about it is, as we talked about last episode, and if you haven't seen last episode, go back and watch it.
Especially for the ending.
He also, in part 2, he battled Carmilla, the female vampire
Yeah.
that predated. And then there's all the other versions of the Belmont clan, the other people. There's Christopher Belmont, Soleil Belmont, Trevor Belmont. I think, isn't Trevor the one that the show introduces?
I don't remember. I saw it a couple of years ago, and I apologize, man. I just don't.
No, that's fine. But it also plays around with, there's also a character that comes back called Alucard. It has a Dracula named Lenore, again, pulling from what we talked about last
Right.
episode. Classical examples. And so, again, if we're going to talk pop culture and talk Dracula, you've got to bring up Castlevania because, again, the Netflix series is a lot of fun. It's interesting. It's well done. It's entertaining, if nothing else. But just as a cultural force, there were a lot of kids in the 80s that didn't read Dracula until they were older. But by the time they were 7 or 8, they had played Castlevania.
Castlevania, yeah. Okay.
So, Castlevania. Got to bring it up for Dracula.
All right, Joe, which one you got?
Not to be confused with your Sylvania.
Totally lost my list. I'm so sorry. Can somebody talk about something real quick?
Well, I'll talk about briefly. We have to talk about, even though I don't know who I'm assuming Joe's not going to bring this up, but the third one the one I struggled with was the one that actually doesn't actually feature Dracula because of legal issues. I'm talking about Count Olaf, Nosferatu, Max Schreck. If you haven't seen Nosferatu, you need to check out Nosferatu. It's an amazing silent film. It's one of my favorites. And Max Schreck as Orlok. Sorry, I said Olaf. It's Orlok. Is really, really creepy and just overly fantastic. And I didn't know that the film was destroyed.
I didn't know it was destroyed.
Yeah, the Bram Stoker's widow had all the film stock destroyed, and it was actually recovered several years later, and they were able to piece it together. So I'm the one thing I wasn't able to look at is the one that we know of today, actually the original cut.
I don't know about that. It's an interesting story because if you're going to watch that, what you need to do is a double feature of that and then Shadow of the Vampire.
I was going to mention
We'll talk about Shadow of the Vampire really quick because it is true that no one knows what the hell happened to Max Schreck, and Max Schreck played Nosferatu. And you're right, they were ripping off Bram Stoker.
And there's even a line. There's a line in Shadow of the Vampire where F.W. Murnau is played by
William
John
Dafoe?
Malkovich.
Oh, John Malkovich.
John Malkovich. William Dafoe plays the vampire.
That's right. Sorry.
John Malkovich plays F.W. Murnau, and he has a great line where he says, "We can't get the widow to even talk to us anymore. She won't give it to us."
Right.
And if you know that history, obviously they're talking about Stoker's widow.
They were talking about Stoker's widow, absolutely. So they just did it illegally.
Yeah, they changed all the characters' names. It's Dracula. They just changed the names.
Now, what they got a little more accurate in Nosferatu is just he's not a good-looking guy. He doesn't he doesn't do the whole eye and kind of pull you in, and he's pretty much a monster though in Nosferatu.
Yeah, no, he's just this creepy rat-looking thing. It's creepy as hell. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just can imagine being in 1922 in probably Germany, in Germany, and seeing that come on the screen, because that could not have been something that they were used to seeing. I can only imagine how scared people actually were seeing Max Schreck as Count Orlok for the first time.
Yeah, there's two movies like that. Three. I always think that would probably have freaked you the hell out watching it for the first time. It would be that. The other one's a German film too, M. And the third one would be Psycho.
Yeah.
Of sitting in a theater in 59 or 60 and watching it beginning to end and realizing we start postmodern.
I know we're talking about Dracula, but
modern starts, and then you get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a few years later, and then all bets are off. But you really need to watch Shadow of the Vampire. And if you're a fan of vampires, and I can bring it up, but I can't be on the list because we're talking about Dracula. One of my favorite vampire films is actually a television movie that ripped off Nosferatu as far as the way it looks, which is Tobe Hooper's Salem's Lot, which is an adaptation of Stephen King's novel, the 4-hour version, not the 2-hour version that they released overseas. There's 2 different versions of that movie. Did you guys know that?
No.
Yep. So they released a 2-hour version overseas in theaters, but here we got the 3-hour what was over the miniseries.
So what's your pick, Joe? Did you find it?
Yep. So going back and forth, having a hard time. Like I said, none of these are necessarily my favorite movies, but if you're going to watch a movie that's, speaking of postmodern, that you're going to watch a movie that's different, that isn't going to show up on anybody's list except for mine. I discovered it when I was going through independent cinema phase in the 90s, like every other person at my age who was between probably 14 and 30. Then you found it and loved the soundtrack and just fell in love with some of the people in it. Have either of you seen Nausea?
No.
I've heard of it.
Yep. That's okay. The ultra hip postmodern, I own it. It's right over here if you want to borrow it. Postmodern vampire tale, and I'm reading this directly from IMDb just because it's kind of hard to explain. Set in contemporary New York City, members of a dysfunctional family of vampires are trying to come to terms with each other in the wake of their father's death. Guess who their father was? Meanwhile, they are being hunted by Dr. Van Helsing and his hapless nephew. As in all good vampire forces, lover pitted against force and destruction. It's shot in black and white. It was an independent film made at that time, and it has a great performance. Probably, other than Yuli's Gold, it's one of Peter Fonda's best performances. He plays Van Helsing. So it's directed by Michael Almerida. He also wrote it.
You said Peter Fonda plays Van Helsing?
Yes.
That's his only role?
That's his only role in that movie.
So why does it say Dracula / Van Helsing?
Oh, he plays him in the flashbacks. I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. But you can't really see because the flashbacks are real blurry when they go to them. It's a kind of avant-garde way it's shot, so you don't really see it. And he kind of lets you know that he's killed Dracula, and he's like, well, he was old, yada, 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 yada by then.
I can't believe I've never heard of this movie.
I can't either, actually. I thought I talked about it from time to time. Nausea is one of those films that's kind of forgotten through that independent wave of cinema that came through in the 90s. But I recommend it. It's Space Hog. Space Hog's great songs in the credit over it. I can't remember the names. Yeah, that's over the credits. So check out Nausea. Dracula kind of is in it. It's not really about Dracula. I know I'm cheating a little bit, but I wanted to bring up something that nobody else was going to talk about, and Nausea would be it. And it does deal with Dracula, family issues, vampirism, black and white, New York movie, 90s independent cinema.
Basically, they're playing around with the same thing of Dracula's daughter, except giving it a great modern polish.
It's much more if these people aren't overly bright.
Right.
Yeah.
Van Helsing's probably not the brightest cookie. Or not the brightest light bulb, you know. These are kind of normal people. They're not living in a castle somewhere off in Transylvania. All right.
So now we're going to talk about the ones that we hate, right?
Well,
go ahead.
Can we throw in one more that we probably should mention?
Yeah, I have one more too.
Go for it then.
I'm going to bring it up because it's actually one of the. There's 2 I need to bring up actually. I'll do one, then Joe can do one, and I'll bounce back to me. I need to bring up because it is probably the most popular of its time as far as one of the great vampire or Dracula comedies. Love at First Bite.
Yeah, I was going. Yeah.
George Hamilton being the most suntanned human being on the planet, to the point that most of you may remember him for advertising sun chips. Those would be the sun-baked snacks. They got him to advertise. He was very, very tan. So the idea of him playing somebody that can't have exposure to sunlight on its face was funny. But it's basically about Dracula coming to New York to find love and being obviously pursued because he is, of course, Dracula. But it was a quote-unquote romantic comedy. I don't. Do you know the year that came out, Joe, off the top of your head?
It'd have been 78 or 79.
I was going to say, I think my parents saw it not long after they got
married. It has a great Sherman Hemsley. He's just
79. 79.
Yeah.
There it is.
Hold on, Joe. They saw it in the theater, right? Necking. That's what they were doing. They were necking.
Now, they were already married by then, Chad.
They were necking in the back of the theater.
Who was necking?
That actually would have been a
mom and dad.
My mom and dad? I doubt
it. Sure, your mom and dad were. Oh, my God.
But anyway, so it was a vampire spoof. Count Dracula moves to New York to find his bride after being forced to move out of his Transylvania castle with the aid of his assistant, Renfield.
It's very much of 79, too.
Yeah.
There's disco, there's...
He stumbles through typical New York city life situations while pursuing Cindy Sondheim, but her boyfriend, Dr. Jeff Rosenberg, realizes she is under the influence of a vampire and tries his bumbling best to convince the police, Lieutenant Ferguson, of what is going on and to help him stop Dracula.
It's a fun movie. It's very much of its time. I prefer it
time.
over the other movie he did, Zorro the Gay Blade. I know people prefer Zorro the Gay Blade. They go back and those are the two off the top of my head that I think of when I think of Mr. Hamilton. Those are the two. But
those are the only two things he's really known for, by the way, because I was really kind of baffled as to how.
Godfather Part 3.
Well, I know he's in Godfather, but I was like, how did he become famous? He's one of those people from the 80s. I'm like, how did he get famous?
This book is famous for how he just hung around people. I've never read it, but I know other people have read it and talk about how he's just a hanger on.
I guess other than the joke about the tan, I was like, how did he's the Kardashian of the 80s.
So there's two movies I want to talk about real quick that I think are important. One of them is also from 79. It's Dracula, that was directed by John Badham. That is really dead up the stage play, okay? It is dead up a stage play. In fact, when they were trying to sell it, the love story, it was called a love story. It's made for television, but it's got a great cast. It's a little weird that Frank Langella is playing Dracula, but they're going for, this is a very good looking, debonair kind of guy, and Frank Langella can pull it off. I mean, he's not my type, but he looks good in that.
I mean, honestly, in terms of when I was looking at the Draculas and I saw Frank Langella, I was like, I saw him as Dracula. I'm like, that makes perfect sense to me.
Does it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's better than Jack Palance. Jack Palance played him in Dan Curtis's Dracula.
That's the one I want to see, the Jack Palance Dracula.
Yeah, there's an actual version of it that Elvira did as hosting when she used to do hosting that you could use to buy on videotape. Anyway, the cool thing about this Dracula is that it has Laurence Olivier as Van Helsing. And I saw this when I couldn't have seen it in 79, but I wouldn't remember. So it had to be on a rerun later on when they were re-showing it. And there's a scene where they descend. And I rewatched this, I think, 2 years ago when I was on paternity leave. And they're going down, I can't remember if it's Lucy's body or whomever, because they have to go through the casket. It's like a cavern underneath, and when they get down there, and she's all zombified and coming, it scared the shit out of me when I was little. And it scarred in my brain, which is probably one of numerous things that have made me the person I am today. And I actually looked at it and thought, that still looks pretty damn good. So even if you don't want to watch the whole movie, I really suggest about the 10 minutes right there in the middle of them going after. It was really well shot. That was probably John Badham the year beforehand did a little movie called Saturday Night something or another. Saturday Night Fever, as a joke. Nobody's going to know what I'm talking about. Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, he directed the night before. So he was hotter than a $2 pistol. And he decided to do a TV movie about Dracula. You guys find that funny? Oddly enough, it was also written by W.D. Richter. W.D. Richter went on to write a little movie I love called Big Trouble in Little China. And he directed a movie you guys might know called Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
No, I thought you were going to say Adventures in Babysitting.
No, he directed Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah. Speaking of cult classics.
Oh, the other one. Are you going to say Blackula?
No, go ahead. If you're going to do Blackula.
Blackula is important.
I was going to bring up. Yeah.
It's not a bad movie.
And its sequel. Scream Blackula.
Yes, we should talk about Blackula. I was going to talk about Blackula. Yeah, so
Blackula is culturally important. That's the reason why I said I have a hard time, because some of these movies are culturally important, and Blackula to me is culturally important.
I agree.
And the reason being is because, yes, is it blaxploitation? Absolutely, but I don't know that it's a horrible movie. Who played Blackula? I had this pulled up earlier.
Oh crap.
I'm going to look it up now. Somebody talk.
Okay.
When did you guys see it? So I saw it as a kid because my mom's weird.
I did not see it till I was in my 20s, and I saw it on like AMC. William Marshall
gives I'm not joking, a tour de force. If you ever get a chance to watch it, he is amazing as Blackula, and is directed by William Crane. his eyebrows screw with me a little bit, and I'm not crazy about the makeup, but he keeps that movie together from it going into complete idiocy.
And by the way, if you don't know who William Marshall is, knowing our audience,
Mm-hmm.
he was the king of cartoons in Pee-wee's Playhouse.
No. I
There
know
you
that. He
go.
also did voice for the real Ghostbusters. I didn't know that either.
So, yeah.
I knew he was
By
a
the way,
character
I love
actor.
the fact. I love the fact that he is cursed with the name Blackula.
Yeah.
That is actually a curse placed on him. He didn't get to choose his name. Which it's actually, I mean, it's blaxploitation. It definitely is, but it actually tries to give. He was an African statesman.
Yes.
That was turned by Dracula himself. So this
Right.
wasn't some he was randomly. He was quote unquote chosen or cursed or however by Dracula to take this role.
Right.
And so it's blaxploitation, but at least they didn't be like he was some random guy. No, he was a statesman. He was his own royalty.
Yeah.
So it is culturally important.
It's culturally important. It really is. And it's not a bad movie. It is very much, I know I've said this a couple of times, it's very much of its time.
Do you think horror, but speaking to that point, do you think horror becomes of its time because we get so inundated, like you get so used to it and you need something new for it to give you that same horror feeling?
Honestly, very few things to me age as well as horror. Comedy does not age as well as horror. There's a great Max Brooks, who's the son of Mel Brooks, who wrote World War Z, who said you date nerds date comedy and marry horror. I don't know why, but yes, I agree with you, but some odd reason I don't. There are certain comedies that do. I mean, obviously, if you're watching something by Buster Keaton
Brooks.
when he was directing Mel Brooks, certain things hold up, but most comedy doesn't. I don't know. I think it's easier. I just think you can do any story. Somebody said this about the Western, but I think it's true of horror films. You can tell any story you want to in a horror film. Any story you want to.
So I'll have the final salvo, I guess, of movies, and I have a hard time saying this is a great Dracula movie, but again, I'm going to say it's culturally significant, and it's somewhat painful to actually talk about it this way, but I think it's because of my kids. The Hotel Transylvania movies, Adam Sandler. I never thought I'd say the Adam Sandler Dracula. However, my kids know Bela Lugosi because I've shown it to them.
Yeah,
and they know Adam Sandler. And if you say Dracula to them and ask you to and say describe what Dracula, you're going to get one or the other. And it may the Bela Lugosi one maybe the one Daddy likes will be maybe Bela Lugosi, but they love the Hotel Transylvania films. We own all three of them.
I get that. My kid saying Vampirina is maybe one of the cutest things ever.
And yeah, so I mean, I think that's one of the
not that
important...
that's Hotel Transylvania just made me think of it because I had
to it's
Vampirina.
Yeah. Well, in Vampirina, speaking of Vampirina, my wife, my kids were at the very when that was first premiering. They were a little bit interested, and now they've outgrown it. But when it first premiered, Dana watched it and been like, "Oh, it's really a show that it's quote unquote kid horror. I mean, she's a vampire, but you can apply it to anything. It's this will be great for kids that are having to come out to their friends as whatever sexuality or whatever, because she's having to be who she is in a new place."
Probably, I haven't watched enough of him to know. He's going to be Mickey Road Racers, Mickey Mouse, or those puppy dog pals. And every time I listen, I go, Harlan Williams, you just making some cash 30 years later.
And he should. But no, Hotel Transylvania, if you've never seen any of them, Adam Sandler is the voice of Dracula, and his wife, the Countess, is killed. And that's the beginning of the first movie.
And who's the voice of his father?
It's Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks.
Yeah. His dad, Vlad, right? His dad is actually
probably. I've only ever seen bits and
Grandpa Vlad, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, but it actually starts on a somewhat tragic note. The movie begins, he flees with his daughter because the villagers burn down, and he develops a hatred of humans. So he creates a place for monsters to go and be themselves. And it's basically Adam Sandler and his friends, the same people that are in a bunch of his movie.
It is like Steve Buscemi,
David Spade, Steve Buscemi, all of that stuff. There's 3 movies out now. There may be 4. Actually, there was space between the second one. I didn't know this, but evidently the director and Adam Sandler had a little bit of a falling out. Allegedly, I don't know. But That being said, are they the best Dracula stories you're ever going to see? No. If you've got kids around and you've got to watch something that has a few jokes, they'll be like, yeah, okay, I'll watch it.
I agree.
Those films are fun. They're and my kids love. And like I said, so if you ask them about Dracula, your eyes are going to get Bela Lugosi or you're going to get Adam Sandler. And I never thought those two would be there. But I wanted to say, I think Hotel Transylvania is culturally significant to a large age group.
All right, what are the worst ones, guys?
All right, I'm going to start off with, I'm going to save my best for last. But we got to talk about how crappy Dominic Purcell was in Blade Trinity.
It's awful.
You wait, it's Blade, Vampire Hunter.
It's a bad movie.
The first one was, it was good.
No, the first one was...
It was entertaining, and it gave us a comic book movie that
Thank God.
springboarded. You got to give it credit for what it is. Blade 2, amazing. And you're like, when are they going to do Dracula? And then 3 comes around, and he's finally fighting Dracula, and you get this cardboard representation of Dracula.
Literally, they might have well just had him, doing the old. It could have been the Count from Sesame Street. Would have been just blah blah one. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't even remember any of his lines.
I don't either. I just remember they showed he had his barrel chest and his his side piece of armor to protect his heart. But that was, it was as underwhelming as you could get when you have Blade fighting Dracula.
Yeah, your ultimate villain for your entire franchise. Because if you go back, Blade, and I think it gets that much more aggravating. Because I read them growing up. My brother collected them, and I read them. The Tomb of Dracula series, where Blade popped up. Blade was pursuing Dracula. If you read those comics, that movie is that much more just angry. You get mad. Because, Dracula versus Blade was this great... both of them were unstoppable. The only difference was Dracula couldn't take the daylight. Other than that, they were evenly matched. And so, yeah, I just think if you're a fan of the source material for Blade, going back historically into the 70s and 80s, that movie is that much more aggravating.
Yeah. It didn't even... I didn't even think the look said Dracula. Just everything about and I like Dominic Purcell. He's, he was in a lesser known TV show from the 90s called John Doe. He was great in that. He's great as one of the heroes in Legends of Tomorrow, currently on the WB. I love Dominic Purcell, but his portrayal of Dracula is painful, plain and simple. Guys, what are your picks for bad Draculas?
I'm going to go up next because it has Rutger Hauer and it was directed by the great Dario Argento. Rutger Hauer was the original pick for Anne Rice. Always wanted Rutger Hauer to play. I forgot Tom Cruise's Lestat.
I forgot his name too.
Interview with a Vampire. She wanted him to play Lestat. It was always Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer is a fantastic actor, but like John Candy, he was in more turkeys and stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, I was watching Split Second the other day. I haven't got to finish watching. I only watched the first 10, 15 minutes of it and realized I had a toddler in the room. So, back to my story. Dracula 3D. I don't know. Dario Argento is hit or miss. I know people love him in the Giallo. How do I say that? Giallo films. They're basically Italian slasher films. I definitely watched the Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Definitely watched Suspiria. These are fantastic movies. Try to, whatever you do, skip Dracula 3D. It is awful. It is terrible. It is not any good.
All right, so hold on. In terms of Rutger Hauer, we gotta have this conversation. Is he better as Dracula?
He's not Dracula. He's Van Helsing in it.
Oh.
Some asshole blonde plays another asshole blonde plays Dracula. I don't remember if he's blonde hair, but he plays Van Helsing.
Oh man, I thought he played Dracula because I was gonna go, well, okay, what Is he better? Okay, fine. Is he better as Van Helsing in Dracula 3D, or is he better as the vampire villain in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh, way better as the vampire villain in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
Because that's a scene-stealing performance, my friend.
It is.
The only person
him and Paul
better
Rubin.
in that movie, the only person who steals more scenes in that movie is Paul Rubin. So
Paul
Rubin
Rubin
walks away with that movie.
There's no argument.
Yeah, that's not a good movie.
No.
However, as batshit nuts as she may be online with a lot of her viewpoints that are far right, Christy Swanson was an absolute treasure to me when I interviewed her. So I just want to say that out loud. She's really nice to me. She's a very nice person to me. I've heard horror stories. I read them later. And I was like, I didn't meet that person.
So
there we go.
James, what about you?
Yeah, thinking about terrible Draculas and not terrible vampire scenes of Draculas, I have to bring up Van Helsing. And I think the reason
I almost pulled it out as my number one favorite just to piss everybody off. And I was like,
I think the reason I have to bring up Van Helsing is that could have been phenomenal. And there's little parts of it.
Well, he used Brides of Dracula in it, which are one of my favorite parts of Dracula. It's one of my favorite. I listed Brides of Dracula as one of my favorite Dracula movies, even though Dracula's not in it. It has so many different aspects that it could have at least been fun. You didn't have to make it just could have been a fun romp, and it still failed.
Oh, that is a terrible, terrible, terrible movie.
Speaking of which, that's actually the worst. That's actually you're talking about. All right. I've never seen Dominic Purcell in anything I like that I can think of, but as far as Dracula goes, he's bad, but I don't know that he's worse than the guy that plays him in Van Helsing.
Well, my entire thing about
he might not be. The guy in Van Helsing does play it really over the top, and he's the villain in James's other favorite movie, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, if I'm not mistaken.
Is he
the villain in that? And he's also the villain in Moulin
Rouge.
But he's really good in Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
My entire...
It's just a bad movie. Well, and the greatest actor to play him. Nobody was better than Hugh Jackman to play Van Helsing.
No, and I think that's what makes me mad. And I think little things, like I don't like the makeup per se. I don't like any of that stuff. But I think the way they characterized Frankenstein's monster is a pretty good characterization based on the book.
Yeah, he whines a lot in the book. I read the book last year, and we did.
He does.
He's a big whiny bitch.
He does because he has daddy issues.
He whines.
That's what the book's about. He was rejected by his creator, his father, and that's what the entire book is about. He wants.
I mean, it's. I swear to God, it's almost like it's a Warren Zevon song. Poor, pitiful me.
Yeah. So I just I don't have much more to say. There's little parts of Van Helsing that I like, but I'm with you.
I can rewatch it sometime. I have it over here. I probably should put it in, see if I can at least enjoy enjoy just the craziness of it. I love the brides too. Jesus.
No, that's the entire thing about it. The problem I have with Van Helsing, and the reason that Dracula is so much more for me, is because that movie should have been awesome.
Like, it should have been.
There's Van Helsing, vampire. I mean, being the monster hunter and having to go after all these things. And the Brothers Grimm movie did that better than Van Helsing did. Yeah, that's still not a great movie. We know
what a clusterfuck that was.
Oh, yes.
We talked about hey, and if you're listening, if you've not listened to our interview with the great editor Patrick Lucier, he could tell you that and Cursed at Dimension at the same time. Great story. Yeah, I and it goes off the rails from the get-go, from the jump. When he is going after Hyde, it's off the rails, right? I mean, it sucks from the jump.
Yeah.
Yep.
His fight with Jekyll is.
That's what I'm saying. When he's going after Hyde, it sucks from the jump.
Yeah. It's painful. That whole movie is painful from beginning to end. Even when you see Dracula, and then that's what they did with Frankenstein.
And the big reveal when they're at the park. Oh, it's just a bad movie.
It's bad.
And it's not a good movie. That's probably Stephen Sommers' worst movie, which is probably, and Stephen Sommers directed one of my favorite guilty pleasures. I love Deep Rising. I know it's not a good movie, but I enjoy it so much. And it's not, the Mummy movies are much better than Van Helsing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that would be one. I mean, there's
And
a
I
couple.
don't particularly care for the Mummy movies, and they're much better than Van Helsing.
Well, the Mummy movie. The problem with if you're talking about the modern Mummy movie,
That's what I'm talking about. The Steven
they're
Sommers,
adventure
he
films.
directed The Mummy and Mummy Returns.
Yeah, they're adventure movies. They're not horror movies.
Yeah, he directed G.I. Joe first film too, which I enjoy about 30% of, but it's...
Well, don't worry. We'll see how this Storm Shadow movie or who is it?
It's Snake Eyes.
Thank you, Storm Shadow. That's who he fights.
That's
right?
the villain.
I don't know. I didn't get to watch your G.I. Joe. In my house, it was communist propaganda or nothing.
All right, so
Comrade.
we've got Dominic Purcell, Dracula 3D, and Van Helsing. And Joe says Van Helsing is the worst Dracula of all time.
It's one of the worst performances of Dracula. I don't understand it. I don't get where he was coming from. I don't know why Steven Sommers directed him that. I don't know what... I'd love to have been on set for the conversation.
I have one that is worse, but I'll let Chad go.
I bet you do not have the one that is the worst. I bet neither one of you will be able to.
If you have the same one I'm thinking of, I'm going to be both shocked and terrified for both of them.
I'm going to be shocked if I don't know it. Go ahead.
All right. So there was a little movie in 1987. I think it's 1987. I am talking about Deformed Monsters, also known as The Creeps.
Never seen it.
It is a Full Moon Entertainment movie.
That's the reason I never saw it.
So let's
Chad
talk
is
about
our Full Moon expert.
Let's talk about this, and before I reveal the actor who played Dracula. So Deformed Monsters is about this evil scientist who wants to bring about the famous monsters of history so he can rule them and take over. So he steals the original manuscripts of all four stories. So Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and the Wolfman. He uses the power from the transcripts to produce these monsters. But there's an accident midway through the experiment, and they do not come out completely formed. They are actually a quarter of the size that they're supposed to be. So I would like to talk about Phil Fondacaro's representation of Dracula.
Never seen it.
Phil Fondacaro, he was one of the short, one of our favorite short actors. He was in Ghoulies 2, Troll, Willow.
He's the guy with the beard.
The guy. He was the short man with the beard.
With the dark beard and the cool voice.
Yeah, and the really cool voice, and he used that voice in Dracula. Now, I'll be the first to admit that when you're looking at this short man playing Dracula, but he has Charlie Band put these bright red contacts that cover his whole eye in the movie, but it's Phil Fondacaro trying to do a crappy Transylvania accent with the worst script you could ever imagine. So in terms of pure cheesiness, you could check out The Creeps actually if you have Tubi. Tubi has a Full Moon Entertainment channel, and you can watch The Creeps. I don't recommend you do that, but if you're curious, check it out to see these four short men playing the Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Wolfman, and Dracula, which, by the way, I want to state that the guy who played the Mummy looks pretty cool as the Mummy. But Phil Fondacaro as Dracula is, in my opinion, the worst Dracula in cinematic history.
I don't think that's on any Dracula list I looked at, even the comprehensive one.
And that's why I was so proud of it when I looked up it and I was like, oh, it's not on any list. I've got this one.
That wasn't what I was going to go with. I'm going to do you one better.
You cannot beat Phil Fondacaro, sir.
Oh, hold on, bud. Now, if you were looking across the cosmos, and let's say 1970s television series, and you can't get the actual actor, but you're trying to pick one actor people may recognize to play Dracula. You can't get him, but you're going to get somebody that looks like him. Who would you pick to play Dracula from 1970s TV?
Darren McGavin. But I think Darren McGavin can do anything.
Chad, anything?
Patrick Duffy.
Oh,
Why
once
not?
again, both of you wrong. You're going to get Mr. Carter.
Gabe Kaplan played Dracula?
No, you can't get him. So what are you going to do? Well, this is the story of 1971's Dracula versus Frankenstein. Now, if you've never seen Dracula versus Frankenstein, don't. Seriously, don't. It's not even creeps. There is nothing visual to see in this film that won't make you sad. Because here's what happened. There was the director, screenwriter, blah, 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 everything, wanted to make this movie. He wanted to make a monster movie. Well, it turns out the monster movie he was making didn't make any sense. So what did he do? I'll just throw Frankenstein in there and film new scenes. That didn't help. Well, I'll add in Dracula, and I'll film some new scenes. I'll call it Dracula versus Frankenstein. It doesn't make any sense. The actor that actually plays, and you can find the trailer on YouTube for Dracula versus Frankenstein, 1971. The actor that does play Dracula looks like Mr. Cotter from
Gabe
Welcome
Kaplan,
Back.
but this is before Welcome.
Oh,
Back.
I know. I just said, but if you look at him, it's like they tried to find somebody that looked like him. Because
the fact that I could just roll Gabe Kaplan right off of my tongue like that.
I know, that was impressive.
So here's the plot that doesn't make any sense. So even after he filmed all these new scenes and cobbled it together, Dracula wants to bring back the Frankenstein monster back to life for no reason. There's never a reason given. He just wants to bring him back. They never actually fight. And Frank wakes up as they get attacked, and Dracula is forced to kill him before he actually ever fully comes alive. And there's no attention to time, so Dracula forgets that he's allergic to sun and dies. That's the movie. That's it. A little bit about this film, though, I did want to bring up.
I haven't a Christie once.
If you're a big fan of certain people, maybe you want to seek this out, because now this is a 3.5 out of 10 rated movie. It is terrible. J. Carroll Naish played Dr. Frankenstein. Lon Chaney Jr., archival footage, played Groton. The actor that actually played Count Dracula went by the name Zandor Vorkov. That was not his actual name. He has all of 2 credits, both of them from 1971.
Is he Zandor Vorkov in both credits?
Yes.
I now know what I'm going to call the editor and producer of the show.
I want to say that Graydon Clark is in it. Now, if you don't know Graydon Clark, if you're a Mystery Science Theater 3000 fan, Graydon Clark went on to direct such notable films as Angel's Revenge, Final Justice with Joe Don Baker, Joysticks with Joe Don Baker, and a bunch of other movies. Basically, Graydon Clark.
Joe Don Baker?
A couple of other ones had Joe. Graydon Clark is still alive. I'd love to have him on this show.
You should reach out to him and say, why weren't you on the Mitchell set?
I don't know.
Is it Mitchell? Is that the other Joe Don Baker one? Mitchell?
Yes. But for Joe and Chad, you may find this interesting. Forrest J. Ackerman plays Dr. Belmont.
Oh, okay. Uncle Forey's in it.
Uncle Forey is in it. So it's got a little bit of street cred because of that, and because it has people that went on to try to do other things. The other movie that
That's real descriptive.
No,
well,
I
it
want
also
to say
stars Russ Tamblyn. It stars Russ Tamblyn too, father of Amber Tamblyn.
Ambler Tamblyn.
Tamblyn. John Bloom is in it as the monster. But the other movie that this guy stars in has even lower rating. Vorkov also starred in Brain of Blood, which was also released in 1971 and only has a 2.9 rating.
James, can I interject here? Now, I don't know if you're going to bring this up or not, but both of those movies, this movie that James is referring to is directed by Al Adamson, who is a notorious B-movie director from the 70s. There's a great documentary about him out. I highly recommend checking out the Al Adamson documentary because he is a very fascinating character who had a very weird demise. Go ahead.
What's the documentary on? What's the name?
It's on Al Adamson.
No, I mean, what streaming platform? Is it on like Netflix or?
I think it's on Amazon. I'd have to check. Let me check.
Amazon Prime. Al Adamson, and it's called Al Adamson.
No, let me look it up. It's got a long title.
Well, and it also had a second director that was uncredited. So take that for what you will. But the other things about this, so this was the last film of J. Carroll Naish, and he was so ill he could only read off of cue cards, which if you see the film, he's reading cue cards.
It's called Blood and Flesh: The Real Life and Ghastly Death of Al Adamson.
This was also the final film of Lon Chaney Jr., even though it used mainly stock footage. So
they kind of say, I thought the final film was Spider Baby.
It's mainly, so this one uses stock. This was the last one released, I guess. It's getting it.
Okay. And I may be wrong by that. You'd have to Google that up, but I would have.
But interestingly enough, if you're also a fan of weird, bad movies, other B movies, Frankenstein's monster is played by John Bloom. John Bloom kills a police officer played by Albert Cole. Why would that be interesting, Joe?
I don't know.
John
Bloom is holy cow. Is that hold on, just give me a second. Is that Joe Bob?
John Bloom and Albert Cole would go together to play the title creature in the incredible two-headed transplant later that same year.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so
what's Joe Bob's real name? I think it is something Bloom.
It may be. It could be. I just know that this is the guy that played it in
no idea.
But yes. Anyway, so there you go. I just wanted to say, but if you ever watched that, Chad, not to knock your Full Moon, because Full Moon didn't have a budget, didn't have anything. But if you watch that movie and you watch it and can tell me 3 redeeming things about it, I'll buy you a sandwich.
If it's Al Adamson, there is nothing redeeming about that. You win.
It is literally like you look at the guy that's supposed to be Dracula and you're like, a stiff wind will blow him over. I can push him and he's not going to get back up. There's no menacing. There's nothing attractive about it. He may be actually the closest thing to the way he's described in the book. I didn't think about that.
I'm really, now that the episode is over, I'm curious, what kind of sandwich are you buying?
Real quick, I know you said the episode is over. I don't think we're going to do another episode about vampire movies in general. Are there any non-Dracula movies vampires that come off the top of your head?
Yeah,
I thought we would end that way.
Chad named 2. I thoroughly enjoy Blade 2, even though I agree with Del Toro. He says now that it has some of the very best CGI and some of the very worst CGI of his career.
Oh, that fight is terrible.
So there's 2. He says both. And I was like, well, I could say that, yeah. So I love Blade 2. I love Salem's Lot. John Carpenter's Vampires is a lot of fun.
Yeah, John Carpenter's Vampires.
He made vampires fun.
Well, and that's based on a novel by John Stakely called Vampires, except the S is a $sign.
Right,
and then you also have to mention, of course, if you're talking about vampire movies that I love, Dusk Till Dawn. You can't.
I saw From Dusk Till Dawn when it opened up. I'm with Chad. It's 2 different movies in one, which always makes it fascinating to me.
Yes.
I'm sorry, James. You asked me this off the top of my head, and I'm sitting here thinking of vampire movies. I truly.
One that's just fun.
One that's a lot of fun that still this is a Roman Polanski film is The Fearless Vampire Killers is actually still quite funny. I watched it a couple of years ago with Christy. It's still funny. Or pardon me,
James
put your teeth in my mouth. What? Huh?
No, nothing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
This is one I caught on the Sci-Fi Channel that I really fell in love with, and it was originally going to set up a sequel until the aforementioned Hammer died away. Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. I enjoy the living daylights out of.
I think it's boring now, but it's another one of those that could be remade.
Yeah, it's just a Sunday morning popping popcorn, just watching it. I enjoy it. The fact that it does star Caroline Munro doesn't hurt it any. I'm not going to lie.
No, she never hurt nothing.
No. But she, but I actually like Horst Jansen, who plays Kronos, and Dr. Marcus, his assistant, who was, he's a hunchback in the film. And it was an interesting twist that he's a good guy helping Kronos because he has all the skills and things to do that. It's a fun movie that came out at the very end of Hammer, I guess. Hammer was on its last wind down when that came out, but it's a lot of fun to watch. Now, of course, you're going to see things coming, but I think at the time it would have been a little bit more fresh. But I really do. So if you've never seen Captain Kronos, the Vampire Hunter, check it out. It was what year was that? 1974.
Yeah. Chad?
I'm just taken back by James. I can't believe he didn't say Vampire's Kiss.
They're not all winners, Chad.
I'll tell you, this one's not a movie, but it's a TV show, and it's also Del Toro, and I enjoyed it. Was The Strain. It's the first book. The first two books in The Strain are really good. He wrote it with another guy. The third book, not so much. The one that wraps it up. I felt like it wrapped up in the series slightly better, so I would recommend the Strain series if you ever get a chance to sit down. It's a good B. I put it up there. It's probably not quite as entertaining as Justified, but I always say Justified is a great example of a good B entertaining show. You're not getting you know what I mean? So the Strain, I like the Strain quite a bit.
And there's another one that we have to mention, because I will mention it both as a movie and now as a series. What We Do in the Shadows. If you're not watching What We Do in the Shadows, you're missing out on just some absolute...
I need to watch the show. You're absolutely right. That's a fantastic movie.
That is a fantastic movie. I really am shocked James didn't mention Vampire's Kiss because of Nicolas Cage. So that wasn't my recommendation. We need to talk about George Romero's Martin.
Yeah, it's probably the most realistic vampire movie ever made.
Yes. So if you haven't seen George Romero's Martin...
It's better that we don't really say anything about it.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything about it. Watch it. Yeah. It is intriguing as hell.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of them, but I wanted to ask what you all thought about it. There's a couple more TV shows. Since you brought up TV shows, I wanted to ask about Nosferatu. How does the TV show hold up?
I've not seen it.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
I read the book, but he's not a vampire in the sense of it's a little weird.
Well, no,
it's not a classical vampire that you would think of in the book. I haven't watched the series I didn't even know it was getting a second season, so I'm trying to kind of confused where they're going with that, because I've read, like I said, it's a really good book, so I highly recommend it. It's one of Joe Hill's best books,
and also a TV series that became a movie, and probably the only soap opera that I've ever watched in any real form. You got to mention Dark Shadows, Barnabas Collins, Sympathetic Vampire, Cursed, etc.
And I even said Darren McGavin. You want to know a movie as far as something I can sit down and watch and have a lot of childhood memories, and it puts a smile on my face, and his performance is The Night Stalker. It's my favorite thing by Dan Curtis. Dan Curtis also gave us the one I was talking about, Jack Palance, earlier with Dracula. Mm-hmm. He also gave us a trilogy of Terror with a little Zuni doll, and he gave us Dark Shadows. Dan Curtis was a mega producer in the 60s and 70s, and when I mean a mega TV producer. So I have to say that they did The Night Stalker, and then they did a sequel to that, a TV movie called The Night Strangler, and then they made a series that only lasted one season called The Night Stalker, where we followed Darren McGavin around. But if you don't get, and they've tried to,
and if you've never seen The Night Stalker, you need to watch it, because it is cited by Carter as being a big inspiration for the X-Files.
Yeah.
And if you've never seen the X-Files, because we're getting old, if you like shows about conspiracy theories and all of that stuff, you need to watch it as well.
Yeah, I highly recommend The Night Stalker. I actually kick myself that I don't own the special edition of it. It was like a few bucks now. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I really like The Night Stalker.
Yeah.
And once again, it's because it has a bleak kind of ending. It doesn't really end well for Kolchak. His career is kind of watch it.
That's why he ends up moving. I mean,
the reason he ends up moving, and then the series kind of blows all that off.
Yeah.
Equals, but.
I want to mention one more. Go ahead, Chad. Did you have?
No, I was just going to the last two quick. I'm going to mention because, like I said, I am not a big vampire fan, but these are two of the other vampire movies that have a soft spot for me. Near Dark, of course,
which I need to rewatch, Chad, because I watched it as a young man and never cared for it, never understood why people do.
I agree with you. I watched it when I was younger and I thought it was boring. I didn't understand the point of it. I watched it several years ago. I still don't understand why it has such a cult following.
It does. It has a huge cult following. And it has the cast of Aliens.
Yeah, but Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton make the movie for me. But again, it's not. I don't think it's as a classic as everybody makes it out to be. And Innocent Blood. That's my last.
Oh shit, Chad. That's one of my favorite vampire. And I don't think that's on DVD. It may be, but I don't off the top of my head.
I want to throw out. This is
I have
not a
an old
vampire
video
show.
copy of it.
This is not a vampire show. It just has a vampire in it, but it's a vampire that I appreciate ever so much. Preacher. Cassidy is.
Oh.
That characterization of him as a vampire, I love every time he has a little umbrella. I mean, and when he feeds on the cows in the field, that first episode that he appears in.
What are you talking about?
Preacher.
Yeah. Preacher. I thought you
Cassidy.
said Preacher. Do you know I haven't
Preacher.
I have yet to finish the last season of Preacher.
I
By
have
the
not
way,
either.
Joe, you can get Innocent Blood on Blu-ray through Warner Brothers Archive Collection.
So I have to order it for them to special make it for me.
Hey, and I feel there's one that I should mention, even though I don't know if I've seen more than half an episode. But I feel if we don't mention, we're going to get people will say something. True Blood. Should we mention True Blood?
No.
I haven't seen a lot of it. I don't know anything.
Christy liked it. I never could get into it. I've never watched Vampire Diaries. I can't speak about it. I've watched a few episodes of True Blood. I just couldn't get into it.
No, thank you.
From what I understand, Rogue is not a vampire, but she can detect vampires. I don't know what's going on.
Is it Sookie? Sulky? Sicky?
I watched
Ziggy.
2 episodes.
Ziggy's going to help Sam get home. It's a very popular Charlene Harris.
Very popular book series, and it was a very popular show.
And it gave us Deborah Ann Woll.
I knew we needed...
She is a very she's actually a very good actress.
She is one of the best parts about Daredevil.
She is one of the best parts, and she was one of the best parts of Escape Room. She's in Escape Room, a movie I reviewed for Scarefest. A movie I ended up enjoying more than I ever thought I would. Don't get me wrong. Don't rush out and watch. I just thought it was going to be awful, and it turned out to be fairly decent. And she's one of the best parts of it.
By the way, do you occasionally see commercials for vampire things and think, maybe when I was younger I'd watch that? But because I'll be honest, maybe y'all have watched this and can correct me. I turned on Netflix a while back. It's been probably 6 months back, and they had the commercial for V-Wars was what they were pushing at the time.
I never saw it.
And I couldn't care less. Oh, actually, there's another movie we should mention because I remember enjoying it in the theater. What's the movie with it's William Dafoe and where everybody's a vampire? And they feed off, and then they find
Daybreakers, directed by the Spielberg brothers from Australia. And next week's episode, I'm sorry.
No, that's
how is that for a next week episode? We're going to have Glenn Cochran from Chad.
Happy Movie Monday,
Australia. So I was going to say, I was going with Australia. The Spielberg brothers, they're the ones doing. I can't remember if they're doing the sequel. I don't know if they actually did it. The Dark Crystal. I didn't watch the Dark Crystal series, so they were doing a sequel to something. I can't remember what it was. But they did a movie I really liked. I can't think of the name of right now, which is pissing me off. That also has who's the lead actor in that? It's not Matthew Modine. It's the other guy. Yeah, Daybreakers is a fun movie.
I need to correct myself. I keep saying It's Good Movie Monday.
Good Movie Monday.
Good Movie
Down
Monday.
Under. I'm making fun of him because he made some sort of moonshine joke Chad was telling me about.
Yeah.
Does he have any?
I mean, if he does, he should split it. I mean,
yeah, tell me about it. Yeah. Good Movie Monday. Good Movie Monday. Check out their podcast. Absolutely. I apologize. I kept saying
they also directed Winchester, which I enjoyed.
Directed Winchester. It was okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much. It's not much per se to it, but it was enjoyable.
Chad did not enjoy it. If for our audience listening, he stuck out his tongue.
I'm sorry, you just hate Helen Mirren. Why do you hate Helen Mirren?
She's a national treasure.
I got nothing. I can't even make a joke about hating Helen Mirren.
That movie should have been better.
There
was a hell of a
lot better.
There should have been. I mean, you have Helen Mirren, and
I think they tried to balance out. We want a little bit of the factual in there, and then and you can't do both.
No,
you can't make House on Haunted Hill and then go, and here's an actual house that we're going to. No, you can't do it.
The last vampire movie I will tell you to check out if you ever get a chance to watch it does have, speaking of House on Haunted Hill, Bruce Campbell. And it is called Sundown, A Vampire in Retreat, if you ever get a chance to watch it.
Yeah.
They have wooden bullets.
Yep.
They
Not to be confused with Billy the Kid versus Dracula.
No, I can't recommend that, but I can recommend Sundown, A Vampire in Retreat.
And James messed it up. It's Billy the Kid meets Dracula's daughter.
Oh,
Just saying.
excuse that
And then what
hell out of
happens?
me.
What happens? And David Carradine plays Dracula in that, by the way.
Yep.
All right, then. So I have a David Carradine story, but there's no point telling it here. Turns out he was drunk in Lexington. It's nice meeting you all. If you guys have anything else, we'll see you again. It was good.
Oh no, James is right. It is Dracula. It is Billy the Kid versus Dracula. Damn it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's
Why
Jesse.
did you make it more complicated?
It's Jesse James meets Frankenstein's daughter. I got those confused. Sorry.
I got my eye on you, baby. Oh.
All
right.
A little light there got me right there.
So thank you so much for tuning in to our two-parter on Dracula.
I'm sorry, everybody.
No,
I did. My problem was more movies because Daybreakers popped into my head, and I'm like, "What the crap is that?" I forgot who was it. Yeah.
No, it's cool. So if you need anything else, let us know. Just give us a call. We can deliver groceries for you.
We're sorry for your loss.
I've been thinking about delivering pizza. A friend of mine's son's doing it, making a lot of cash here in the COVID world, delivering those pizzas. So thank you so much. Tune in.
And tune in next week where we talk about the best farts in movie history. Mel Brooks is Blazing Saddles.
We're going to talk about Blazing
minutes.
Saddles for 25 minutes, and only 5 minutes of that will be about the fart scene. Rather than sitting around eating beans, drinking coffee, what'd you think? All right.
Oh, no, Major Pain, too. The fart scene in Major Pain.